am so excited about this episode. I have a very special guest on today. We have Dr. Christy Kane. We're going to be talking about after the kids grow up and reclaiming you. I have so many women that reach out mostly after the kids have gotten married and they just feel like they've lost their identity in what they're doing. And I talked to Dr. Kane about this, and she is an expert in this field. And I'm so excited to have her come on and talk to us. So, welcome, Dr. Kane.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Yeah, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about you, about your practice, and what you do?
Okay. So I work in the field of psychology. I have two outpatient clinics, one in Lehigh, one in Provo. I think I have about 24 clinicians who work for me now. And we specialize in all different kinds of things just because each one of my clinicians kind of has their own, area of expertise that they do. And then I actually speak all over the country. So
Awesome. Awesome. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. So, tell the audience a little bit about what led you to work closely with women in this season of their life and kind of learn about what's going on with them.
I've always been fascinated by culture versus religion because there's culture and there's religious culture, right? And they're not the same thing. And I'm not from Utah, but as I've been here in Utah for a long time, there's an interesting dynamic that I see as women kind of shift out of that expected culture process into now what? Who am I? Where do I belong? How do I fit? And I've kind of dealt with it not only just when the transitions of all the kids have left the home, but a divorce transition,
Yeah.
not having children transition. And it's just always been fascinating to me, the identity shift due to the culture when our identity should be something we're nurturing all of the time
Mm.
because it shouldn't be tied to what we do, but who we are. But this
Yeah.
culture seems to shift that a little bit.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, what are the most common emotional experiences women are having during this transition time that don't get talked about enough? You talked about there's this culture piece, but I think sometimes it's something that kind of comes upon women because we're not talking about it. So, what are some of those emotional experiences do you think women are experiencing in these transitions?
You know, they're feeling alone. They're feeling depressed. They're feeling anxious. They're feeling empty. Like we know that one of the number one issues for mental health is loneliness. And I think they're feeling detached, almost a loss of themselves. And so I think most of it runs in the depressive mood area in the field of psychology,
Yeah.
but it's really that loss of identity. And many of them kind of traded that over the years, but traded it because they thought, well, this is what is expected of me.
Hmm.
And, it's funny. I say to mom sometimes, you're always you first. A mom and a wife, yes, but you're always you first. And if you don't nurture that well, when the title of wife or mom goes away, then you have this dried up well that creates a lot of sadness.
Very true. Very true. And really in spirituality, when we're talking about identity, we want to build our identity in being a daughter of God, right? That if we build our identity in other things, like you said, those things can shift and change, but being a daughter of God never changes, right? That is your identity and really building it in who you are.
Yeah. But understanding that identity is your creativity, right? So many people culturally will shift that identity that, well, if I'm a true daughter of God, then I'm this phenomenal mother or phenomenal
Mhm.
wife. And so what happens when you're no longer the mom or you're no longer the wife, right? And I appreciate what you said because that true identity is you, all the things that are unique about you, the things that
Mhm.
you love doing, if you're artistic, if you're whatever,
Yeah.
those should never be set aside or traded in the pursuit of the other two titles. Because if that well stays full, you're a much better mother and a much better wife, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So when women are wanting to explore more about their identity, how can they stay connected to their faith, but also grow their identity and expand in some of those other areas that you were talking about?
Well, the first thing is always recognizing appropriate boundaries. It is appropriate for women to sometimes say, tonight, I just need to be Christy.
Mhm.
And that means I'm going to go do this art class because this is a boundary I need to set for me, or I need to do my music, not to compromise or trade the other relationships, but to support and empower them. And I think that gets confusing. It's so easy to surrender that boundary to the demands of the other voices that seem to be stronger and louder. But it's really important to learn to hold an appropriate boundary because before you ever got married or before you ever had children, you were identified by that first name. And
Mm.
that first name needs a boundary even within the other relationships.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So, if women are listening to this and they're, feeling like, "Oh, I'm in this stage of life. I feel like I'm transitioning into something different, whatever be the circumstance in their life," and they're feeling some of those emotions that you talked about. What are small doable things that they can do to kind of rebuild this purpose in this season of their life and reconnect to that identity?
Be curious and be adventurous and be vulnerable.
Mm,
Be willing to try something you've never tried before. I think what I see when I work with some of my clients is comfortableness. Become so comfortable in their status quo that when it's gone, they're afraid to go
yeah.
try something on their own, you know? And so be curious. If you've ever dreamed once about doing pottery or, learning to sing or play a guitar or whatever, be curious and try it. You might find out it's not your thing,
Yeah.
but then you might find out you like it. So you've got to be curious.
Yeah.
You've got to be vulnerable. Like, one of the biggest problems, like I taught Relief Society Sunday, and it was called No One Sits Alone by Elder Gong, right? I'm single. When they asked me to give that talk, I was like, I sit alone every single Sunday, So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
don't make it about you, Dr. Kane.
Yeah.
And so, that was one thing that the sisters all shared is we're afraid to be vulnerable with each other. And women need that. And they
Yeah.
need connection and they need other sisters like Elaine Jack is my adopted mom, phenomenal woman. And she said to me more than once, women need women.
Yeah.
And so when you're at that stage and things are transitioning, like my daughter took a while to have children and she had to do IVF. And I loved that she shared with her friends. She wouldn't share with mom, which could have hurt my feelings, but I'd
Yeah.
read her Facebook posts and go, oh, that's how she feels,
Yeah.
Be vulnerable, be curious, and, just be willing to try different things. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that idea. Sometimes when we get in this stage and you're transitioning and you think, I've got to go back to be this person that I was prior, right? And so maybe they are thinking, well, I used to like this, so I guess I have to like this. But I love that idea of being curious about maybe there are different things that I never knew that I might like. And we need to try those things. And just because you don't have a friend to go do it with you, or someone isn't already an expert in it, that that it's okay to go out there and be curious and try some of these things.
yeah, because you're not the same person you were 20, 30 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you might, they state that taste buds change every 7 years.
Mhm.
If you think about that, we might have liked eggs when we were kids, but may not like them now.
Oh,
And so,
interesting.
yeah, it's important to be curious, vulnerable, and
Yeah.
adventurous. And it's difficult to try things alone. I think a lot of us are afraid of aloneness. And there's a difference between being lonely and
Mhm.
being alone. They're not the same thing. And
Can
it's
you talk more
okay
about
to
that? I
sure.
think people misunderstand that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, being alone, I love being alone at times and doing things. I feel fulfilled in those quiet, peaceful moments when I can do something I like. Now, I started a weird hobby. I don't know why. I decided to build Legos,
I love that.
and those some of those Legos are like, oh my gosh, they're like 4,000 pieces, so they take
Yeah.
me months to put together.
Yeah.
But I'm alone building them, but I'm not lonely. Lonely is that feeling of sadness, emptiness, loss, hurt. It's that uncomfortableness, right? We can be
Mhm.
together and be alone,
Mhm.
and we can be alone and not be lonely. And
Yes.
so that's that big difference. Like I know sisters can sit in Release Society surrounded by other sisters and they feel lonely.
Mhm.
And a sister can be sitting alone and not feel lonely. Loneliness is what we're concerned about. When you feel empty, lost, less than, not good enough, those are things we want to help you process through. But
Yeah.
learning to be alone is important because in being alone, you have to learn to like you
Mm.
and accept you and see you
Yeah.
because all of the other voices are shut off and it's just you.
Yeah. Oh, I love that thought. I love that thought because it's so true. People can be in a crowded room and feel lonely, right? They can have people talking to them. They could be having a conversation with somebody and still feel lonely. And that's something that you do want to work on and go to therapy, or maybe there's some depression going on and figuring that out. But also being alone isn't a bad thing. And sometimes we may
Right.
mischaracterize that, right? Like I'm alone and that means something about me, when in reality, maybe maybe it's about getting to know you when you're alone and what you like and doing things alone.
Yeah. Because, for so many women in the transition, depending on why the transition is happening, they've been so focused on everybody else that maybe they have to rediscover who they really are.
Mhm.
And we
Yeah.
can do that with other people. And sometimes we have to do it just by ourselves.
Do you have any tips for women who are like, "Well, I'm alone. How do I rediscover who I am? Like what am I doing when I'm being alone?" I'm doing that.
You know, uh, spending time writing,
Mm.
spending time doing art. I love art therapy. I tell people paint from your heart. I don't care what ends up on the canvas, but just imagine you on the canvas. Go buy some paints, a blank not this little, like a big canvas, and paint yourself.
Mm.
That tells people a lot about themselves in that artistic format. And they will paint some things they never imagined. And some of it they'll like, and some of it they may want to change. And so it's really, read good books, listen to good music, all of that. But really, the therapeutic process I like is telling someone to paint themselves
Mm.
in a quiet room all by themselves. Paint you.
I like that. I like that. What do you recommend if they look at those things and they don't like those things about themselves?
Well, I think therapy is always a great
Yeah.
thing. Statistically, we know that 90% of all people who sit down in a therapist's office start getting better. Not cured, but
Mhm.
better. And a therapist's a mirror, right?
Yeah.
So take your painting, go to the therapist's office and process that painting. And
Mm.
they may see something you didn't see. Like many times I've had clients bring me back their painting and I go, I see this. What's that? And they're like, oh, I didn't see that before. And then we have this amazing discussion of
Yeah.
something they learn about themselves. Or take it
Yeah.
to a friend. It doesn't have to be a therapist,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, take it to a friend and process the painting.
That's part of that being vulnerable part, right?
Yeah.
And being
Yeah.
being willing to share some of those things, being willing to talk to people about maybe what pain or um
Yep.
hurts are inside or inadequacies that you're feeling, and being vulnerable and sharing those.
You bet. But isn't that when the deepest connections come?
Yeah.
We connect with humans when they share their pain points, not when they tell us how wonderful they are. Not that that
Yeah.
doesn't create connection as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's that vulnerability that allows our hearts to connect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the third thing you said is be adventurous. What would you recommend? How are women being adventurous, and what are they going out and doing, or how do you recommend they be adventurous?
Take a trip. Go somewhere and do something with people you've never met. There's a lot of different small trips out there that you can go on with total strangers. There's trips for just women. When I say be adventurous, I mean go do something with people you've never met, because that gives you a chance to reflect and really think about the world in a completely different way. When you are backpacking in South America with a group of women you've never met, you have to learn to connect
Hmm.
because you're relying each other to make it through that very difficult hike.
Yeah.
Take a trip. Even if it needs to be you're not ready to do it with strangers, call up a few of your girlfriends and take a trip. Take a drive down to St. George, learn how to golf. I don't care. When I say be adventurous, I mean do something you've never done before. Learn to scuba dive. Really get out of your comfort zone, because when you do that, you get back that divine woman power of who you are, because then you realize I can do anything.
Mm, I like that. So being adventurous really connects you back to that strength that God has given you through him, and helps you
Yep.
recognize that's a part of you, because you're putting yourself out of that comfort zone. It makes you need something bigger than yourself.
Yep. And you, whether you win or lose, it's the journey that matters. Maybe you take a trip to hike some big mountain and you realize you can't climb all the way to the top. But if you made it halfway, that's that celebration point. That's that internal strength, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Knowing the gospel, converting to the gospel is an adventure. And every person has to have their own conversion journey.
Yeah. That's true. Would you say that everyone kind of has a journey of getting to know themselves? Like everybody at some point goes through this transition time where they have to get to know them?
I think so. I think some people might be better at it than others. Like, I think some people may have held their boundaries better so that as the transitions come, they might be more prepared for them.
Mm.
But I think every transition is a crossroad
Yeah.
and a decision time. But yeah, I do think, and I'm hoping the younger generations are getting better at it than my generation was, because there was a lot of cultural things taught when I was a young person that we don't teach anymore in the church, that we've kind of realized, yeah, that backfired. And so I think the young women today, just think about when the young women's value came into play. Like, that wasn't when I was in young women's. I think we're getting better at helping young women to understand you have a unique and powerful identity, and don't trade it
Mm.
for any reason, and nurture it along the way so
Yeah.
that when the crossroads come, you are empowered to live the life you want with you or your spouse or you by yourself, right?
Yeah. So do you feel like some of those teachings, even though they're not taught anymore, might be coming up, kind of running a tab in the background of some people's minds when they're transitioning, that might make it difficult for them to figure out who they are?
Yes, because for so long culturally the message was be a mother, be a wife. And those things don't change. They're still very important. But foundationally, to be a mother and to be a wife, you're a daughter of God. And so I think a lot of people go through identity crisis when those roles are taken away. Like right now, the gray divorce is significant in our culture. I never imagined it would be, but there are a lot of women going through a gray divorce who are totally lost
Talk more
because their
about what
whole
a gray
life,
divorce is. What?
um, people getting divorced much later in life after all
Mm,
the kids are raised. It kind of used to be in our culture, if you made it 30, 40, 50 years in marriage, you just stayed married.
yeah.
And we are seeing divorces after 50 years, after 60 years, after 40 years. And a lot of women in those divorces who whole identity was to be a wife and to be a mother, that is being taken away in a sense, and
Yeah.
they're totally lost. There's a huge crisis.
And yeah, and I think it can be difficult, right, to do that all on your own. I think sometimes, because women might be experiencing divorce and their kids are grown, right? And now I
Right?
really am alone and I don't know who I am and I don't feel a purpose anymore because that purpose was to be a wife and a mother. And I thought I was still going to be that wife even after my kids grow up and you're still a mother and things, but
Yes.
your role changes and the
Yep.
need from your kids changes. I've had so many women reach out to say, I was fine when my kids moved out, went to college. I was fine when my kids went on a mission. The time that I was really sad was when all of them were married, and it felt like nobody needed me anymore
Yeah.
because they felt like, their spouse now needs them and they're needed somewhere else, and that's when that transition really hit them. Have you noticed that kind of as well? But they're still married, they're still happily married, but that identity really shifted in, "Man, I don't have anybody that needs me anymore."
Sure, because we go back to the culture, right? It said so much of your role was to serve and be a mother and be a wife, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if in doing all of that, you also didn't nurture you, when that service need is diminished, then what?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's when you have to come back to rediscovering yourself.
I love that.
Well, and we also have, which is kind of sad, and I'm sure you see this, but we have the cancellation culture too going on, where unfortunately some adult kids are deciding, I don't need my mom and dad anymore, and they kind of terminate those relationships. And then you have a major crisis
Yeah,
for a lot of women who are like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden my kids are saying they don't need me. They don't
yeah,
want to see me. Now what? So there's a number of difficult transitions. Those are
yeah.
pain points, right? And they're hard, but we've got to remember your well always needs to be filled up.
Mm, yeah.
And a well, I tell my clients, you run around with a bucket and a dipper. And when you're a mom, your kids are taking water out of it all day long. If
Yes.
right? And
Yep.
if you're not putting water back in, you're hitting tin.
Yeah.
And your kids don't typically put the water back in.
Right.
And so you've got to find that way to put the water back in.
This is awesome. So, any final last words that you have for the woman listening to this that's going through a transition that is just like, this is me. I'm scared though. I'm scared. I don't know if I can do this. This is hard. What advice would you give her?
Don't do it alone. Talk to someone, friends, family, a counselor. There's so many people that can help you through it. And again, sometimes we feel like we got to be strong and powerful and we have to let everybody believe everything's fine and okay. No, we don't. No, we don't. If you're not okay, I hate it. I hate it when people say to me, I'm fine. And so my acronym is feelings in need of expression, FINE. Talk. If you're struggling, tell someone. If it's hard, tell someone. If you want some advice, so what should I try? Ask someone.
Hmm.
We're stronger together, and there are people to help us through difficult times. And transitions are difficult whenever they happen in life, for whatever reason they happen.
Yeah. I love that. Don't do it alone. And I think to add to that too, where people like want to put on this brave face, I think also people don't want to burden other people. They feel like, "Oh, I don't want to put my burdens on them. They already have a lot going on. They already have, this and that." And so then they feel like, "Well, I don't want to ask for help because I don't want to be a burden to somebody."
Why do we think that? That's a culture thing. I don't know
Yeah.
why we think that. I agree with you. And yet, most of us don't consider it a burden when our friend opens up to us.
Yeah.
And we'll make these assumptions. And I'm like, where does that come from? Like, I don't know. I've never said to someone, oh, wait a minute, you're being a burden. Please don't share.
Right.
So it's a
Yes.
dumb thought. That's a dumb
Eh,
thought. But
yeah.
it people think it all the time.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
wish we wouldn't, because I don't think we think that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's Yeah, I think it's this self-reliance kind of like just you're supposed to rely on yourself, but really self-reliance is learning to use your resources and your assets around you and being able to share your experiences and what you're going through builds that reciprocal relationship also to show them it's okay if you share your experiences with me, right? Because if we're not doing that and we're not sharing those experiences, then they're not going to feel comfortable sharing their experiences with us. And we also isolate that other person as well.
You know, I love the fact that Jesus Christ, in all of his teachings, physically touched the people that he dealt with.
Mm.
And can you imagine if any of those parables said, "Oh, I can't go ask Christ to heal me. I'd be a burden." They didn't.
That's so true.
They knew he would receive them and they knew he would listen.
Mm.
And I think that's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, so true. Allow people to show up like Christ showed up for people.
Yep.
That's beautiful. Oh, I love this. I love all of this. This is so helpful. I feel like this is a topic that women kind of silently suffer in, and I want to have more conversations about this. I hope people will reach out and talk more about this, and so it's not the culture, right? It's not the norm of just silently suffering and getting to that point where you come to this transition and you've lost you and you haven't had that. Like if you're listening to this and you're not going through this, take this and start doing some of these things now so that when those transitions come, this isn't you and you're not feeling those emotions with that too.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Kane, where can people, if they're like, I would love to talk with one of your therapists, what resources do you have for other people or where can we send them?
So, both of my centers are called Kane Counseling, and they can find us on the web at Kane Counseling. Kane's Kane, just, like Citizen Kane,
Yeah.
not Cain, but the Kane. But yeah, they can just look us up on the web.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. I think this is so helpful. If women are listening to this and you know somebody going through this transition, please share this episode with them as well. I think a lot of times we hear these podcasts and we think, oh my gosh, I've got to go implement all the things. But remember, it's through small and simple things that great things are brought to pass. Take something small and simple from today, implement it, and you'll notice great things happen in your life. Thank you for coming on, Dr. Kane. I appreciate you sharing all your knowledge today.
You bet. Thank you so much.